I'm Victoria Murray, 28 years old, and I've spent my life being the family's punching bag. At our annual gathering in East Hampton, my sister leaned across the dinner table, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're not getting a single dollar, Victoria." My parents nodded their faces stone cold like I was some failed experiment. Everyone laughed except me. I wasn't surprised, though. I'd been building something in secret, something huge. My company HealthSync was about to change everything. Then my phone rang right there at the table. My assistant's voice blasted through. "Ms. Murray, SoftBank just wired $50 million. You're now officially a $150 million CEO. The room froze. Forks dropped. My sister's smug grin vanished. They thought I was nothing. They were wrong. Want to know how I turn the tables on my family? Hit that subscribe button and stick around for the full story. Growing up in the Murray family was like living in a pressure cooker. My father, Philip Murray, and my mother, Joan Murray, built a fortune in New York's finance world, hedge funds, stock portfolios, the works. They owned a townhouse on the Upper East Side, a yacht docked at the Hamptons, and enough clout to get invited to every high society gala. Their pride and joy was my sister Courtney Murray, a 32-year-old finance whiz who could charm a room and crunch numbers like a machine. She was their golden child, the one they paraded at charity events and boardroom dinners. Me, I was the odd one out, the 28-year-old, who didn't fit their mold. From as far back as I can remember, Courtney and I were never close. She had this way of looking at me like I was a stray dog who'd wandered into her perfect world. When I was 12, I built a model of a heart monitor for a science fair. It won first place, but at dinner, Courtney smirked and said, "Cute toy, but it's not like you're saving lives." My parents chuckled, and my mother said, "Honey, focus on something practical like Courtney's internships." That stung, but it wasn't new. Every time I mentioned my passion for medical technology, they'd roll their eyes or change the subject. My father once told me, "Finance is legacy, Victoria. Your gadgets won't keep the family name alive." By high school, I was used to it. Courtney was off at Wharton racking up accolades while I was geeking out over biology and coding at my private school in Manhattan. I'd spend hours sketching designs for devices that could help people with chronic illnesses. One night, I showed my parents a prototype for a blood sugar tracker I'd coded on my laptop. My mother glanced at it, then said, "That's nice, but Courtney just landed a deal with Goldman Sachs. That's real success." My father nodded, not even looking up from his phone. I stopped showing them my work after that. The worst part wasn't their words, it was their silence. At family dinners, they'd gush over Courtney's latest deal or her glossy magazine features. I'd try to chime in, maybe mention a breakthrough I'd read about in medical tech, but they'd just nod politely and move on. Courtney would lean back smirking like she'd already won some game I didn't know we were playing. Once at a holiday party, a family friend asked what I did. Before I could answer, Courtney cut in. "Oh, Victoria's just tinkering with her little tech projects." Everyone laughed. I forced a smile, but inside I was burning. Aunt Esther, my mother's younger sister, was the only one who didn't treat me like an afterthought. At 55, she was a retired nurse who'd seen enough of the world to know what mattered. She'd pull me aside at those stuffy gatherings and say, "Keep going, kid. They don't get it, but you're onto something." Her words kept me sane. She'd tell me stories about patients who struggled with diabetes, how a device like the one I dreamed of could have changed their lives. That fueled me more than anything. By the time I left for Stanford, I'd learned to tune out the noise. My family thought I was chasing a pipe dream, but I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for the people who needed what I could build. Still, every phone call home was a reminder of how little they thought of me. My mother would ask, "When are you going to get a real job?" My father would say, "Courtney's running circles around you, step it up." And Courtney. She'd just send me links to her Forbes interviews, no comment needed. Looking back, those years of being sidelined built a fire in me. I wasn't just fighting for my company, I was fighting to prove I wasn't invisible. Leaving for Stanford in 2015 was my escape hatch. At 18, I was done with the Murray family's judgment, ready to carve my own path. I majored in biomedical engineering, diving headfirst into a world of circuits code and human physiology. My professors saw something in me, a spark maybe, and I graduated in 2019 with a 4.0 GPA, top of my class. But when I called home to share the news, my mother's response was a distracted, "That's nice, honey. Did you see Courtney's feature in the Wall Street Journal?" My father didn't even pick up. Courtney sent me a text. "Congrats, I guess. Don't expect a parade." I didn't. I was used to their indifference by then. After graduation, I stayed in Silicon Valley. The tech scene was electric, startups popping up, ideas colliding, people betting big on the future. I wanted in. My dream was to build something that could change lives, not just bank accounts. I'd been obsessed with diabetes management since Aunt Esther told me about her patients struggling with clunky monitors and endless doctor visits. So I started sketching out HealthSync, a device that used AI to track blood sugar in real time and sync it with a patient's phone. It wasn't just a gadget, it was a lifeline for people who felt trapped by their condition. By 2020, I was all in. I rented a tiny apartment in Palo Alto, lived off instant noodles, and poured every cent of my savings into HealthSync. I coded late into the night, taught myself machine learning, and cold-called engineers to join me. Most hung up, but a few believed in the vision. My first hire was a brilliant data scientist who'd worked at Google. We built a prototype in 6 months, a sleek device that could predict blood sugar spikes before they happened. When we tested it with a local clinic, patients cried tears of relief. That's when I knew we were onto something real. I called home once, hoping maybe they'd care. My mother answered, half listening. "Sounds risky," she said. "Courtney just closed a $10 million deal. Why don't you try finance?" I hung up fuming. Courtney's deals were their benchmark for success. My work was just cute. My father emailed me a week later, "Focus on something stable, Victoria. You're not Courtney." No kidding, Dad. I didn't want to be. The next year was brutal. I pitched to dozens of investors, facing rejection after rejection. Too niche, they'd say, or medical tech's a tough sell. But I kept going. Aunt Esther sent me $5,000 from her savings, her way of saying she believed in me. That money bought us a second prototype. By 2022, HealthSync had a small but loyal user base, and we caught the eye of a venture capital firm. They invested $2 million, enough to hire a team and scale up testing. Patients were calling it a game changer. Doctors were calling me for demos. Still, when I emailed my parents a link to a TechCrunch article about us, they didn't reply. Courtney did, though, a snarky, "Hope you're not in over your head." By 2024, HealthSync was gaining traction. We partnered with a major hospital network in California, and our user base grew to 10,000. I was working 18-hour days, troubleshooting, code meeting with regulators, and pitching to bigger investors. My team became my family, people who saw the same future I did. One night, I got a call from a SoftBank executive. They'd been watching us crunching the numbers. "We're interested," they said. "Let's talk serious money." I didn't tell my parents or Courtney. They'd never asked about HealthSync, so why would they care now? Looking back, those years were my proving ground. Every rejection, every late night, every snide comment from Courtney or dismissive sigh from my parents pushed me harder. I wasn't just building a company, I was building myself. HealthSync wasn't about fame or money. It was about giving people control over their lives. But deep down, I knew the East Hampton meeting would be my chance to show my family they'd underestimated me. Not for their approval, but for mine. The summer of 2025 was supposed to be just another Murray family gathering, but it felt like walking into a lion's den. I'd flown in from California for the annual meeting at our family's East Hampton estate. The agenda was clear. My parents were divvying up their fortune, and I knew I was in for a fight. I sat at the polished mahogany table, my stomach in knots, as my father cleared his throat to start the discussion. My mother sat beside him, her posture rigid, her eyes fixed on some invisible point. Courtney lounged across from me, sipping wine, her smirk already telling me she was ready to gloat. My father didn't waste time. "We've decided how to divide the estate," he said, his voice clipped like he was addressing a boardroom. "Courtney's proven herself. She's built a name in finance, a legacy we can trust. You, Victoria, haven't shown that kind of stability." My mother nodded, her lips pursed. "Your tech projects are a gamble," she added. "We can't risk the family's wealth on that." The words hit like a slap, but I held my ground, my jaw tight. I'd spent years building HealthSync, pouring my soul into it, and they were dismissing it like it was a hobby. Courtney leaned forward, her eyes glinting. "Let's be real, Victoria. You're not cut out for this. Stick to your little gadgets." Her laugh was sharp like a blade, and a few cousins around the table chuckled along. I felt my face burn, but I didn't flinch. Aunt Esther, sitting quietly at the end, gave me a small nod, her way of saying, "Don't let them break you." I clung to that, but the room felt like it was closing in. My parents' decision wasn't just about money, it was a public declaration that I was less than Courtney, less than their expectations. I tried to speak up. "HealthSync isn't a gamble," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's helping thousands of people already. We're saving lives." My father cut me off. "Numbers don't lie, Victoria. Courtney's firm manages billions. What's your company worth?" "A few thousand," Courtney snorted, swirling her wine. "Exactly. You're playing with toys while I'm running the show." My mother chimed in. "We're proud of Courtney's achievements. You need to find your own path, honey." The condescension in her tone made my blood boil. They hadn't even asked about HealthSync, hadn't read the articles I'd sent, hadn't cared enough to look. The conversation shifted to logistics, trust funds, properties, shares. My parents outlined Courtney's inheritance, the Manhattan townhouse, a stake in their hedge fund, the yacht. I was left with nothing but a vague promise of future considerations if I proved myself. I sat there silent as Courtney gloated, tossing out ideas for redecorating the townhouse she'd soon own. My cousins nodded along, eager to stay in her good graces. Aunt Esther tried to change the subject, asking about my work, but my mother waved it off. "Let's not get sidetracked," she said. "This is about securing the family's future." I felt like I was shrinking, like every word was designed to erase me. I'd faced rejection before, investors, critics, late nights when nothing worked, but this was different. This was my family, the people who were supposed to believe in me, telling me I wasn't enough. I kept my hands folded, nails digging into my palms to stop myself from exploding. I wanted to scream that HealthSync was real, that it was changing lives, that I wasn't the failure they thought I was. But I knew they wouldn't listen. They never had. As dinner approached, the tension hung heavy. Courtney kept throwing jabs, each one sharper than the last. "Maybe you can sell your gadgets at a flea market," she said, grinning as the table laughed again. My father didn't stop her. My mother just looked away. Aunt Esther reached for my hand under the table, squeezing it gently. "You're bigger than this," she whispered. I nodded, but inside I was breaking. I'd come to East Hampton hoping for a chance to be seen, but all I got was confirmation that I'd never belong. What I didn't know then was that everything was about to change. Dinner was served, but I could barely touch my food. The weight of my parents' decision and Courtney's smug jab sat heavy in my chest. The table buzzed with small talk, cousins joking, my mother praising Courtney's latest deal, my father nodding along like a king approving his heir. I kept my head down, picking at my plate, trying to block out the sting of their words. Aunt Esther caught my eye, her quiet smile urging me to hang on. I was seconds from excusing myself when my phone buzzed on the table. I'd forgotten to silence it, a rookie mistake. All eyes turned to me as the buzzing cut through the chatter. Courtney rolled her eyes, muttering, "Can't even handle a dinner without your toys." I grabbed the phone, intending to mute it, but the caller ID stopped me. Cold Sally Becker, my COO. I hesitated, then answered, keeping my voice low. "Sally, this better be quick," I whispered. Her voice came through loud, too loud, on speaker by accident. Ms. Murray SoftBank just wired $50 million. HealthSync's officially valued at $150 million. You're a CEO on fire. The room went dead silent. My heart stopped. I fumbled to turn off the speaker, but it was too late. Every word had echoed across the table. My father's fork froze mid-air. My mother's wine glass hovered, her mouth slightly open. Courtney's smirk vanished, her face paling like she'd seen a ghost. My cousin stared wide-eyed as if I'd just pulled a rabbit out of a hat. Aunt Esther let out a soft, "Well, I'll be damned," and raised her glass, her eyes sparkling with pride. I cleared my throat, trying to steady myself. "Sorry, that was my team," I said, my voice shaking just a bit. Courtney recovered first, her laugh forced. "What, did you win the lottery or something?" she said, trying to play it off. But her voice cracked, betraying her shock. My father set his fork down, his eyes narrowing. "What's this about $50 million? He asked, his tone sharp like he was interrogating a junior analyst. My mother leaned forward, suddenly interested. "Victoria, what exactly is HealthSync doing?" she asked, as if she'd ever cared before. I took a deep breath, the weight of years of dismissal fueling me. "HealthSync builds AI-driven devices to help people manage diabetes," I said. "We just closed a deal with SoftBank. They're backing us because our tech is saving lives. It's valued at $150 million. The words felt surreal coming out of my mouth. I'd dreamed of this moment, but not like this. Not with my family staring at me like I was a stranger. Courtney scoffed, but it was weak. "That's cute," she said, her voice faltering. "But it's probably a fluke. Tech crashes all the time." My father ignored her, his eyes locked on me. $150 million, he repeated like he couldn't believe it. "And you didn't think to tell us?" I almost laughed. "Tell them they'd never asked." My mother chimed in, her tone softer now, almost calculated. "Honey, this is impressive. Why didn't you share this sooner?" The hypocrisy burned. They'd called my work a gamble hours ago. Aunt Esther cut through the tension. "To Victoria," she said, raising her glass higher, "for proving them all wrong." A few cousins hesitantly raised their glasses, unsure how to react. Courtney's face twisted like she'd swallowed something sour. My father cleared his throat again, his voice measured. "This changes things," he said. "We should discuss how this fits into the family's portfolio." My mother nodded, already scheming. "Yes, we could leverage this for our foundation," she said, as if my work was theirs to claim. I sat there, my phone still warm in my hand, Sally's words ringing in my ears. This was the moment I'd waited for, not their approval, but the chance to stand taller than their doubts. But their sudden interest didn't feel like pride. It felt like opportunism, like they saw me as a new asset to exploit. Courtney's eyes darted between me and my parents, her confidence crumbling. For the first time, I saw her not as the golden child, but as someone scared of losing her throne. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing was clear: I wasn't the invisible daughter anymore. The silence after Sally's call didn't last long. As the shock wore off, my family's gears started turning, not with pride, but with calculation. My mother was the first to pivot, her voice suddenly warm like she'd rehearsed it. "Victoria, this is a game changer," she said, setting her wine glass down. "We should sit down and discuss how we can support HealthSync." Support, the word felt like a bad joke. Hours ago, she'd called my work a gamble, and now she was acting like my biggest fan. I didn't respond, just stared at her, letting the hypocrisy sink in. Courtney jumped in next, her tone sharp but laced with a fake smile. "You know, I could feature HealthSync in my next investor pitch," she said, leaning forward like we were suddenly partners. "My firm's got connections, Wall Street, Silicon Valley. I can get your little startup some real exposure." Her words dripped with condescension, as if my company needed her to succeed. I clenched my jaw, remembering every time she'd dismissed my work as a toy or a pipe dream. Now that money was on the table, she wanted a piece of it. My father, ever the strategist, saw dollar signs. This valuation changes the equation, he said, his voice calm but commanding. We should bring HealthSync into the family's investment portfolio. I'll have my team draw up terms to integrate it with our hedge fund. Integrate, he meant control. The man who'd never bothered to ask about my company now wanted to stake a claim. I could see the wheels turning in his head. HealthSync wasn't my achievement to him. It was a new asset for the Murray Empire. Even my cousins, who'd laughed at Courtney's jabs earlier, started chiming in. One suggested a family branding campaign to tie HealthSync to the Murray name. Another asked if I needed strategic advice from their consulting firm. It was like watching vultures circle. They didn't care about the patients using my device or the lives we were saving. They saw a shiny new toy to boost their own egos and bank accounts. Aunt Esther stayed quiet, her eyes fixed on me like she knew what was coming. I let them talk, their voices overlapping with ideas about leveraging my success. My mother mentioned a charity gala where HealthSync could be a headline sponsor, her charity, of course. Courtney doubled down, pitching a joint venture where her firm would guide HealthSync's growth. "You're not equipped to handle this kind of money," she said, her smile tight. "Let me take the lead." My father nodded, adding, "We'll need to review your financials, Victoria. This is too big for you to manage alone." The audacity floored me. They'd ignored me for years, and now they thought they could waltz in and take over. Finally, I'd had enough. I pushed my chair back, the scrape against the floor cutting through their chatter. "Let me make this clear," I said, my voice steady but cold. "HealthSync isn't yours to claim. You didn't believe in me when I was coding in my apartment eating ramen to save money. You didn't care when I sent you articles about our first users or when I begged you to listen." I turned to Courtney. "You called my work a flea market project. Now you want to advertise it?" "No thanks." Her face flushed, but she didn't respond. I looked at my father. "And you," I said, "you told me to get a real job. HealthSync is my job, my legacy. It's not a line item for your portfolio." My mother tried to interrupt, her voice soft and manipulative. "Honey, we're just trying to help." I cut her off. "Help? You called it a gamble. You chose Courtney over me every single time. I built this without you, and I'll keep building it without you." The table was quiet now, the air thick with tension. My cousins avoided my gaze, suddenly fascinated by their plates. Courtney's hands gripped her napkin, her knuckles white. My father's jaw tightened like I'd insulted his authority. My mother's smile faltered, but she tried to salvage it. "Victoria, we're family. We can work together on this." I shook my head. Family doesn't tear you down for years and then claim your wins. You don't get to rewrite the story now. Aunt Esther finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "You should be proud of her," she said to the table. "She did this despite you, not because of you." My parents didn't respond, and Courtney just stared at her wine. I felt a rush of gratitude for Aunt Esther, but also a clarity I'd never had before. These people weren't my allies, they were opportunists, and I was done letting them define me. As I sat back down, I knew this wasn't the end of their scheming, but it was the end of my patience. The air at the dinner table was suffocating, their voices still echoing in my head. My mother's fake warmth, Courtney's scheming pitch, my father's cold calculations. I'd spent my life chasing their approval, but in that moment something snapped. I was done. Done with their games, their conditions, their need to control everything I'd built. I stood up, my chair scraping the floor, and every eye turned to me. For once, I didn't care what they thought. "I'm done with this," I said, my voice cutting through the room. "You don't get to claim my success now, not after years of telling me I wasn't enough. I built HealthSync for people who needed it, not for you to parade it at your galas or add it to your portfolio." My mother's face tightened, her smile gone. "Victoria, don't be dramatic," she said, her tone sharp. "We're trying to build something together." I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. Together. You didn't want me in your world until there was money on the table. That's not family. That's business. Courtney leaned back, her arms crossed, trying to look unfazed. You're making a mistake, she said, her voice low. You need us. HealthSync won't survive without our connections. I met her gaze, unflinching. I've survived without you my whole life, Courtney. I don't need your connections. I've got my team, my investors, my vision. HealthSync is mine. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't have a comeback. For once, she looked small. My father tried to take charge, his voice booming. Victoria, sit down. We're not done discussing this. But I was already done. No, Dad, I said, the word sharp on my tongue. You don't get to order me around anymore. You made your choice when you wrote me out of the estate. I'm making mine now. I turned to the rest of the table, cousins, aunts, uncles, all watching like this was some reality show. I'm not your fallback plan or your cash cow. I'm done trying to prove myself to people who never saw me. Aunt Esther's eyes glistened, a proud smile tugging at her lips. She didn't say anything, but her nod was enough. My mother tried one last time, her voice softer, almost pleading. Victoria, you're part of this family. Don't walk away. I shook my head. You stopped being my family when you chose sides. I'm not walking away. I'm choosing myself. With that, I grabbed my phone and my bag, and I walked out. The sound of the heavy door slamming behind me felt final, like a chapter closing. I didn't look back as I left the East Hampton estate. The drive to the airport was a blur, my hands gripping the wheel, my mind racing. I called Sally from the car. We're moving HealthSync, I told her. Seattle. It's a fresh start, away from all this. Sally didn't hesitate. I'm in, she said. The team will follow you anywhere. Her loyalty grounded me, a reminder of the family I'd built, one that believed in me without strings attached. Seattle made sense. It was a tech hub far from the New York finance world that had suffocated me. HealthSync needed room to grow, to focus on our mission without my family's shadow looming over us. By the time I boarded my flight, I'd already emailed our lead investors about the move. They were on board, excited about the new direction. I spent the flight sketching out plans, new hires, expanded R&D partnerships with Seattle's medical research centers. For the first time in years, I felt free, like I was finally running toward something instead of away. Leaving wasn't easy. A part of me ached for the family I'd wanted, the one that cheered you on, not the one that kept score. But I knew staying would mean losing myself to their expectations. Aunt Esther texted me as I landed. You did the right thing, kid. Keep shining. Her words were a lifeline, but they also reminded me of what I was leaving behind. Not just the estate or the money, but the hope that my parents or Courtney would ever see me for who I was. As I stepped off the plane in Seattle, the weight on my chest lifted. HealthSync wasn't just a company, it was my proof that I didn't need their validation to succeed. I was starting over, not because they'd pushed me out, but because I'd chosen to walk away. The road ahead wasn't clear, but it was mine. 6 months after leaving East Hampton, I stood in a Seattle conference room facing a sea of reporters and flashing cameras. HealthSync was no longer just a startup, it was a movement. Today, we were announcing our expansion into Europe, with partnerships lined up in London, Berlin, and Paris to bring our AI-driven diabetes monitors to millions more. Sally stood beside me, her steady presence a reminder of the team that had become my real family. As I stepped up to the podium, I felt a surge of pride, not for proving my old family wrong, but for building something that mattered. Thank you for being here, I began, my voice clear and steady. HealthSync's mission has always been about empowering people to live better lives. Our devices have helped over 50,000 patients manage their diabetes with confidence, and today, we're taking that mission global. We're launching in Europe next quarter, partnering with top hospitals to make real-time health monitoring accessible to all. The room buzzed with questions, but I kept going. This isn't just about tech. It's about hope. It's about giving people control over their health no matter where they are. The reporters ate it up, scribbling notes and firing off questions about our tech, our timeline, our impact. Sally handled the numbers, breaking down our $50 million SoftBank investment and our $150 million valuation with the precision of a seasoned COO. But the moment that hit me hardest was when a young reporter asked, "What inspired you to keep going despite the challenges?" I paused, thinking of the nights I'd doubted myself, the years of my family's dismissal. "The people who need this," I said. Every email from a patient saying Health Sync changed their life, that's what kept me going. After the press conference, I stayed to talk with a group of high school girls invited through a STEM outreach program. They were bright, curious, and a little nervous, clutching notebooks filled with questions about coding and biotech. I saw myself in them, the girl who'd sketched medical devices in her bedroom, ignored by everyone but Aunt Esther. "Don't let anyone tell you your ideas aren't enough," I told them. "You don't need permission to dream big. Learn, build, fail, try again. That's how you make a difference." One girl, barely 16, asked how I dealt with people who didn't believe in me. I smiled. "You prove them wrong by doing the work." The event wrapped up with a flood of emails and calls, investors wanting meetings, hospitals requesting demos, even a tech influencer pitching a podcast. But none were from my parents or Courtney. They'd been trying to reach me since I left East Hampton. Texts, voicemails, even an email from my father's assistant about a family meeting. I didn't respond. My mother sent a message claiming she was proud and wanted to reconnect. Courtney left a voicemail offering to collaborate on a new project, her tone all business, no apology. I deleted them all. Aunt Esther was the only one I replied to, thanking her for her support. Her response was simple: "Keep leading, kid." Settling into Seattle felt like breathing for the first time. HealthSync's new headquarters was a hub of energy engineers tweaking algorithms, designers refining prototypes, and patient advocates sharing stories that fueled our mission. We were already planning our next device, one that could track more than just blood sugar. I spent my days in meetings, my nights mentoring young women in STEM through local programs. It wasn't about fame or money, it was about building a legacy that meant something, one that didn't carry the Murray name. Sometimes late at night I'd think about my family, not with anger, but with a strange kind of clarity. They'd shaped me not by their support, but by their absence. Every time they'd dismissed me, they'd pushed me to fight harder. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had my team, my mission, and the lives we were changing. Seattle was my home now, not because of the city, but because of the space I'd carved out for myself. As I looked out over the skyline from my office, I knew this was just the beginning. It's been a year since I walked away from that dinner table in East Hampton, and I've learned more about family than I ever thought possible. Not the kind you're born into, but the kind you choose. I used to think family was about blood, about shared names and shared wealth, but I was wrong. Family is the people who see you, who believe in you, even when you're not sure you believe in yourself. For me, that's Sally, my team at HealthSync, and the patients who write to us every day saying our work gave them a second chance. That's the legacy I'm building, one that's mine, not tied to anyone else's expectations. Looking back, I don't regret leaving. It wasn't just about escaping my parents' control or Courtney's constant need to one-up me. It was about realizing I didn't need their validation to know my worth. Every time they dismissed me, called my work a gamble, laughed at my dreams, they pushed me to fight harder. I built HealthSync from nothing, not because they supported me, but because they didn't. That's the irony, their doubt became my fuel. It drove me to create something that's now saving lives across continents, from Seattle to Stockholm. I think about Aunt Esther often. She was the only one who saw me not as a disappointment or a rival, but as someone with something to offer. Her texts still come short and simple, always ending with "keep shining." I keep them in a folder on my phone, a reminder that one person's belief can be enough to carry you through. As for my parents and Courtney, I haven't heard from them in months. Their messages stopped after I ignored their attempts to reconnect. I don't know if they're angry or just embarrassed, and honestly, I don't care. I've let go of the need to fix them or prove them wrong. My energy is better spent elsewhere. HealthSync is growing faster than I ever imagined. We've expanded to 5 European countries with teams on the ground, training doctors and patients on our devices. Last month, we hit a milestone: 100,000 users worldwide. Every number represents a person, a parent, a kid, a teacher, who can live without the constant fear of a health crisis. That's what keeps me up at night, not anger toward my family. I'm working on a new project now, a device that could monitor multiple conditions at once. It's ambitious, but so was HealthSync when I started sketching it in my dorm room. To the girls out there dreaming of STEM, or anyone who feels like they're not enough, don't wait for someone to hand you permission. Your value isn't in what others think of you. It's in what you build, what you stand for. I spent years waiting for my family to see me to say I was good enough. That was time wasted. The moment I stopped chasing their approval, I started building my own path. You can too. Take that first step, whether it's learning to code, starting a project, or just believing you're capable. Don't let anyone's doubts, including your own, stop you from creating something real. I want to thank you for following this journey. Your support, your comments, your stories. They mean the world to me and my team. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We're sharing more about HealthSync's mission, the tech behind it, and the people it's helping. Drop a comment below, tell me what you took away from this, or share your own story of proving someone wrong. I read every single one, and they inspire me to keep going. Let's build something bigger together. This isn't the end of my story, it's just the start of a new chapter. I don't know what's next, but I know I'm not looking back. If I can leave you with one thing, it's: this family is who believes in you. Don't wait for recognition. Build your own value. Now go out there and make it happen.
Nobody wants Grandma's designs anymore, Kenneth said with a smug chuckle, his voice echoing through the glass-walled conference room. We need fresh blood on the innovation team, not outdated concepts from the 80s. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, watching 25 years of dedication crumble in front of my colleagues. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Bright Hollow Labs' downtown Phoenix office, casting long shadows across the polished table where my career was being dissected like a failed blueprint. My name is Eliza Freeman. I'm 56 years old, and I've been designing sustainable architecture since before it was trendy. For over 2 decades, I've poured my heart into this firm, creating innovative green buildings that balanced functionality with environmental responsibility. I've won awards, mentored young architects, and helped establish Bright Hollow Labs as a leader in sustainable design. But today, none of that seemed to matter. Your aesthetic has become... Kenneth paused, searching for the right words while adjusting his expensive watch. Dated. The market wants sleek, modern designs that speak to younger demographics. Your work feels too traditional, too rooted in the past. The other partners nodded in agreement, their faces a mixture of false sympathy and relief that they weren't in my position. I could see how they'd already made up their minds before I'd even walked into the room. This wasn't a discussion, it was an execution. Effective immediately, you'll be transitioning off the innovation team, Kenneth continued, sliding a folder across the table toward me. We're restructuring to focus on more contemporary approaches to sustainable design. You'll be reassigned to our restoration division, working on historical preservation projects. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were relegating me to fixing old buildings while dismissing the very experience that had taught me how to create lasting, beautiful structures. I thought about all the late nights I'd spent perfecting designs, all the client meetings where I'd fought for sustainable materials when they were expensive and unpopular, all the young architects I'd trained who were now sitting silently around this table. I understand, I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. When does this transition take effect? Next Monday, Kenneth replied, already shuffling through other papers. Harrison will take over your current projects. We'll make sure the clients are informed of the change. As I gathered my things and walked toward the door, I caught a glimpse of my latest project sketches still pinned to the presentation board. Designs for an innovative, eco-friendly housing complex that combined solar technology with natural ventilation systems. Little did Kenneth know, those dated concepts were about to prove him very wrong. Walking back to my office, I tried to process what had just happened. The hallways of Bright Hollow Labs felt different now. Less like home and more like a place where I was merely tolerated. I'd spent so many years here that I could navigate these corridors with my eyes closed. But now everything seemed foreign. I'd joined the firm straight out of graduate school, back when sustainable architecture was considered a niche specialty rather than an industry standard. My mentor, Patricia Holloway, had founded the company with the vision of creating buildings that worked in harmony with their environment. She'd retired 5 years ago, selling her shares to the current partnership, and with her went the soul of the company I'd helped build. Kenneth Morrison had been climbing the corporate ladder ever since, bringing with him a focus on profits over principles. He favored flashy designs that looked good in architectural magazines, but often sacrificed long-term sustainability for immediate visual impact. His idea of innovation was installing smart home technology in otherwise conventional buildings and calling them revolutionary. I thought about my daughter Claire, who lived in Seattle with her 2 children. She'd often asked me why I stayed at a firm that seemed to undervalue my contributions. "Mom, you could start your own practice," she'd say during our weekly video calls. "You have the experience and the reputation." But Bright Hollow Labs had been my professional identity for so long that I couldn't imagine working anywhere else. As I reached my office, I noticed the photos on my desk, images of buildings I'd designed over the years. There was the community center in Tucson that had won a state sustainability award, the elementary school in Tempe that had reduced its energy consumption by 60%, and the affordable housing project in Mesa that had become a model for other cities. Each project represented not just a building, but a piece of my professional soul. My computer chimed with an email notification. It was from the Phoenix Green Housing Initiative, marked with high importance. I'd submitted my independent design proposal 3 months ago, working on it during evenings and weekends in my home studio. The city had announced a competition for sustainable, affordable housing concepts, and I'd decided to enter under my own name rather than through the firm. The email was brief but promising. They wanted to schedule a presentation meeting for the following week. My heart began to race as I realized that while Kenneth was pushing me toward the exit, my own work might be opening an entirely different door. I quickly responded, confirming my availability, then sat back in my chair with the first genuine smile I'd felt all day. The weekend passed in a blur of mixed emotions. I found myself oscillating between anger at Kenneth's dismissive treatment and excitement about the upcoming presentation with the city. Saturday morning, I spread my competition designs across my dining room table, reviewing every detail with fresh eyes. My concept centered around modular sustainable housing units that could be adapted to different family sizes and lot configurations. The design incorporated passive solar heating, rainwater collection systems, and rooftop gardens that residents could use for growing food. The aesthetic was clean and modern, but grounded in practical functionality, what Kenneth would probably call grandma's designs, but what I knew was simply good architecture. Sunday afternoon, Claire called for our weekly check-in. "You sound different, Mom," she said after I'd told her about being removed from the innovation team. "I was expecting you to be more upset." "I am upset," I admitted, walking around my home office where I'd spent countless hours on personal projects. "But I'm also feeling something I haven't felt in years: freedom. For the first time, I'm working on something that's entirely mine." "Tell me about this city project," she said, and I could hear genuine interest in her voice. I explained my housing design concept, how it could provide affordable, sustainable homes while creating a sense of community through shared green spaces and energy systems. As I spoke, I realized how passionate I still felt about my work, despite the firm's attempt to make me feel obsolete. "Mom, this sounds incredible," Claire said. "When is your presentation?" "Tuesday afternoon. I've been refining the proposal all weekend." I paused, looking at the drawings spread across my desk. The funny thing is, this design incorporates everything I've learned over 25 years. It's not dated. It's evolved. Monday morning arrived with an email from Harrison, the young architect who would be taking over my projects. He wanted to schedule a meeting to discuss the transition. I agreed, though I found it ironic that someone half my age with a fraction of my experience was considered more innovative, simply because he preferred glass and steel over natural materials. The meeting was professional but awkward. Harrison clearly felt uncomfortable about the situation, and I didn't want to make it harder for him. He was talented, just inexperienced, and none of this was his fault. "I've reviewed your current projects," he said, spreading files across the conference table. "Your work is really impressive. I hope I can maintain the same level of quality." "You will," I assured him. "Just remember that sustainable design isn't about following trends. It's about creating buildings that will serve people well for decades." As I handed over my project files, I felt a strange sense of closure. These buildings would be completed by someone else, but they represented my past. Tuesday's presentation would determine my future. Tuesday morning, I arrived at the office early to finish clearing out my workspace from the innovation team area. The building felt quieter than usual, with most staff not arriving until 8 a.m. I'd always been an early riser, preferring the peaceful hours before the day's chaos began. Kenneth walked by my former desk as I was packing the last of my personal items. "How's the transition going, Eliza?" he asked, his tone suggesting he was asking out of obligation rather than genuine concern. "Smoothly," I replied, not looking up from the box I was filling. "I'll be completely moved to the restoration department by this afternoon." Good, he said, then paused. "I hope you understand that this decision wasn't personal. It's just business. The firm needs to stay competitive." I finally looked up at him. This man who'd spent the last 5 years systematically undermining everything Patricia Holloway had built. "I understand completely, Kenneth. Sometimes change is exactly what's needed." He seemed satisfied with my response and continued toward his corner office. What he didn't know was that in 3 hours, I'd be presenting to the Phoenix Green Housing Initiative Committee, potentially launching a new chapter of my career that would make his definition of competitive look extremely narrow. At 1 p.m., I left the office for my presentation, telling my assistant I had a dentist appointment. The Phoenix City Hall was a 15-minute drive from Bright Hollow Labs, and I used the time to review my talking points one final time. My hands were steadier than I'd expected. Apparently, years of client presentations had prepared me for this moment. The committee meeting room was smaller than I'd anticipated, with 5 members seated around a rectangular table. Dr. Angela Rodriguez, the city's Director of Sustainable Development, led the introductions. The other members included a city planner, a housing advocate, an environmental engineer, and a community representative. "Ms. Freeman," Dr. Rodriguez began, "we've reviewed your preliminary submission, and we're quite impressed. Your modular approach to sustainable housing addresses several key challenges we're facing in Phoenix. Could you walk us through your concept in more detail?" For the next 30 minutes, I presented my design with a passion I hadn't felt in years. I explained how the modular units could be manufactured off-site to reduce construction waste, how the passive solar design would minimize energy costs for residents, and how the integrated community gardens would provide both food security and social connection. "The beauty of this system," I said, pointing to my technical drawings, "is its adaptability. A young couple might start with a 1-bedroom unit, then add modules as their family grows. Empty nesters could downsize by removing sections, which could then be used for other families." The environmental engineer leaned forward. "What about maintenance costs? These systems look complex." "Actually, they're designed for simplicity," I replied. "The solar panels and rainwater systems use proven technology with minimal moving parts. The construction materials are chosen for durability and low maintenance. Over a 20-year period, residents would save significantly on utility costs." The questions continued for another 20 minutes, each one allowing me to demonstrate the depth of thought I'd put into every aspect of the design. These weren't just pretty drawings. This was a comprehensive solution to urban housing challenges. "Miss Freeman," Dr. Rodriguez said as the session concluded, "we have 3 more presentations this week, but I can tell you that your proposal addresses our requirements exceptionally well. We'll be making our final decision by Friday and announcing the winner next Monday." As I drove back to Bright Hollow Labs, I felt a mixture of hope and nervous energy. Whether or not I won the competition, I'd reminded myself that my designs weren't dated. They were timeless, practical, and innovative in ways that mattered beyond aesthetic trends. The rest of the week crawled by at an agonizing pace. I threw myself into my new role in the restoration department, reviewing historical preservation guidelines and studying architectural drawings from the 1920s and 1930s. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Kenneth dismissed my work as dated, I was now officially responsible for maintaining buildings from nearly a century ago. Thursday afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor. Harrison knocked on my new office door, looking uncertain. "Eliza, do you have a minute? I'm running into some issues with the Scottsdale project." I gestured for him to sit down. The Scottsdale project had been my baby, a mixed-use development that combined residential units with retail space and office areas, all designed around a central courtyard with native desert landscaping. "The client is asking for modifications to the ventilation system," Harrison continued. "They want to add more mechanical cooling, but I'm not sure how that affects your sustainability calculations." I pulled out my original notes for the project. The natural ventilation system was designed to work with the building's orientation and the thermal mass of the adobe walls. If you add conventional air conditioning, you'll need to recalculate the energy load for the entire building. We spent the next hour going through the technical details. Harrison was bright and eager to learn, but he lacked the experience to understand how changing one element of a sustainable design could affect the entire system. As we worked, I realized how much institutional knowledge was walking out the door with my demotion. "You know," Harrison said as we finished, "I've been looking at your other projects. Your approach to sustainable design is really sophisticated. I don't understand why." He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable, criticizing the partners. Why I was moved off the innovation team. I finished for him. Sometimes experience is seen as a liability rather than an asset. Friday morning brought an email that made my heart skip. Dr. Rodriguez wanted to schedule a follow-up call for 2 p.m. The subject line read, "Phoenix Green Housing Initiative, Next Steps." I tried not to read too much into the phrasing, but next steps sounded promising. The call lasted only 10 minutes, but they were the most important 10 minutes of my professional life. "Miss Freeman, I'm pleased to inform you that the committee has selected your modular sustainable housing design as the winner of our competition. Your proposal scored highest in every category we evaluated: innovation, sustainability, cost-effectiveness, and community impact." I sat in stunned silence for a moment, then managed to say, "Thank you. I'm honored and excited to move forward." "The formal announcement will be made Monday morning at 10 a.m., Dr. Rodriguez continued. "We'll be holding a press conference at City Hall, and we'd like you to be present to answer questions about the design. This is a significant initiative for Phoenix. We're planning to build the first phase of 200 units within 18 months. After the call ended, I sat in my office, processing what had just happened. In the span of 1 week, I'd gone from being dismissed as irrelevant to winning the most significant housing competition in the city's history. My dated aesthetic had just been selected to house thousands of Phoenix residents in innovative, sustainable homes. I thought about calling Claire immediately, but decided to wait until after the public announcement. There was something satisfying about keeping this victory private for a few more days, especially while Kenneth continued to restructure the innovation team around more contemporary approaches. Looking at my calendar, I realized that Monday's press conference would occur during the weekly staff meeting at Bright Hollow Labs. I wondered if anyone would be watching the local news. Monday morning arrived with unusual warmth for October in Phoenix. I'd spent the weekend preparing for the press conference, reviewing my design details and anticipating questions from reporters. The weight of the moment was starting to sink in. This wasn't just a professional victory. It was validation of everything I'd spent my career working toward. I arrived at City Hall 30 minutes early, wanting time to compose myself before facing the cameras. Dr. Rodriguez met me in her office, along with Mayor Patricia Thompson and several other city officials. Miss Freeman, before we begin, I want you to know how impressed we were with your presentation, Mayor Thompson said. This housing initiative represents the future of sustainable urban development, and your design will serve as a model for other cities across the Southwest. The press conference was held in the main lobby of City Hall, with local television stations, newspaper reporters, and representatives from architectural publications in attendance. As I stood at the podium beside the mayor, I thought about all the late nights I'd spent working on this design in my home studio, never imagining it would lead to this moment. Today, we're proud to announce the winner of Phoenix's Green Housing Initiative, Mayor Thompson began. After reviewing proposals from firms across the region, we've selected an innovative modular design that will provide affordable, sustainable housing while creating vibrant communities for our residents. She turned to me, and I stepped forward to address the audience. This design represents 25 years of learning how to create buildings that serve both people and the environment, I began. These homes will use 60% less energy than conventional housing while providing residents with gardens, community spaces, and the flexibility to adapt their living spaces as their needs change. The questions from reporters were thoughtful and detailed. A journalist from the Arizona Republic asked about construction timelines, while a representative from Architectural Digest wanted to know how the design addressed Phoenix's unique climate challenges. With each answer, I felt my confidence growing. Miss Freeman, a reporter from Channel 12 asked, I understand you're an architect with Bright Hollow Labs. How does your firm feel about this selection? I paused, choosing my words carefully. This was an independent submission. I developed this design on my own time, using my personal experience and vision for sustainable housing. As the press conference concluded, I noticed several familiar faces in the crowd. Word had apparently spread quickly through Phoenix's architectural community. I saw colleagues from other firms, former clients, and even a few current Bright Hollow Labs employees who had obviously left work to attend. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Mom, I just saw the news online. I'm so proud of you. Her message was followed by a string of celebration emojis. The drive back to Bright Hollow Labs felt surreal. I'd just been announced as the winner of the city's most significant housing competition, but I still had to return to my desk in the restoration department and pretend this was just another Monday. As I walked through the office lobby, I could feel eyes following me. The news had clearly reached the firm. Janet, the receptionist, gave me a knowing smile and a thumbs up. Several junior architects stopped their conversations to congratulate me. I made it to my office without encountering Kenneth, but I knew that conversation was inevitable. My phone was already buzzing with calls from reporters wanting follow-up interviews, and my email inbox was filling with congratulatory messages from colleagues across the industry. By noon, it was clear that my dated aesthetic had just become the most talked-about architectural design in Phoenix. The irony was delicious, but I wasn't finished yet. Kenneth appeared in my office doorway at 1 p.m., his expression a careful mask of professionalism that couldn't quite hide his frustration. Eliza, congratulations on your competition win, he said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. Quite an achievement. Thank you, I replied, not looking up from the historical preservation documents I was reviewing. I'm pleased the city appreciated the design. I'm curious, he continued, settling into the chair across from my desk. When exactly did you develop this proposal? I don't recall seeing any modular housing concepts in your recent project portfolio. I set down my pen and met his gaze directly. I worked on it during my personal time, using my home studio. The design process took about 6 months, primarily evenings and weekends. Kenneth's jaw tightened slightly. I see. And you didn't think to discuss this with the firm? After all, Bright Hollow Labs has been your professional home for 25 years. The competition guidelines were clear that submissions could come from individual architects or firms, I said calmly. I chose to submit as an individual. But surely you understand the optics here, Kenneth pressed. You're a Bright Hollow Labs employee winning a major city contract just days after being restructured within the firm. It could appear that we don't recognize our own talent. I almost laughed at his audacity. The competition was announced 4 months ago, Kenneth. The submission deadline was 3 months ago. The judging process has been ongoing for weeks. None of this happened just days after anything. He stood up, his composure finally cracking. The partners and I need to discuss how to handle this situation. The press is already calling for statements about our role in the project. I'll save you the trouble, I said, returning to my documents. I'll be handling all media inquiries personally. By Tuesday morning, the story had gained momentum beyond what anyone anticipated. The Phoenix Business Journal ran a front-page feature titled, "Local Architects Independent Design Wins City Housing Competition," with a sidebar article analyzing the growing trend of sustainable architecture in the Southwest. More significantly, Architectural Review, the industry's most prestigious publication, had picked up the story. Their online article, Innovation from Experience: How 25 Years of Practice Led to Award-Winning Design, included a detailed analysis of my modular housing concept and interviews with sustainable design experts praising the approach. Kenneth called an emergency partners meeting for Tuesday afternoon. I learned about it from Harrison, who'd been asked to compile all materials related to my previous projects for the firm. They want to see everything you worked on for the past 2 years, he told me, looking uncomfortable. Kenneth specifically mentioned reviewing your project documentation for any connection to the winning design. I almost felt sorry for them. They were scrambling to find some way to claim partial credit for my success, not understanding that this design represented a completely different philosophy from anything Bright Hollow Labs had pursued under Kenneth's leadership. Wednesday brought the phone call I'd been expecting. It was Kenneth, his voice strained with forced enthusiasm. "Eliza, the partners have been discussing your recent success, and we'd like to propose a solution that benefits everyone. We're prepared to offer you reinstatement to the innovation team as lead sustainable design architect. We'd also like to discuss how Bright Hollow Labs might serve as the implementing firm for your housing project." I let the silence stretch for several seconds before responding. "I appreciate the offer, Kenneth, but I'm quite content in my current role. As for the implementation, I'll be working directly with the city's selected construction partners." His sharp intake of breath was audible through the phone. "Eliza, surely you can see the mutual benefit here. The firm's resources, our established relationships with contractors. The city has already selected their preferred partners," I interrupted gently. "The decision is final." Thursday morning, I submitted my resignation letter to Bright Hollow Labs. After 25 years, it was time to start my own practice. The Phoenix housing project would be my first major client, but the phone hadn't stopped ringing since Monday's announcement. Architecture firms from across the country were calling, wanting to discuss partnerships or licensing agreements for my modular design concept. Kenneth made one final attempt to change my mind, appearing at my office as I packed my personal belongings. "This is a mistake, Eliza. You're throwing away decades of stability for what might be a short-term success." I looked around the office I was leaving behind, then at the man who'd tried to make me feel obsolete. "Kenneth, you told me nobody wanted Grandma's designs anymore. It turns out you were wrong about what people actually want." Claire flew down from Seattle for the weekend to help me set up my new home office. As we arranged my drafting table by the large window overlooking the desert landscape, she asked about my plans. "I'm going to design buildings that last," I told her. "Not just structurally, but in terms of their value to the communities they serve. I'm going to prove that experience and wisdom aren't dated. They're essential." The first phase of the Phoenix Green Housing Initiative broke ground 6 months later. Mayor Thompson invited me to the ceremony, where I watched construction crews laying the foundation for homes that would shelter families for generations. The design that Kenneth had dismissed as outdated was now being studied by urban planners from around the world. As I stood there watching my vision become reality, I realized that sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't proving your critics wrong. It's proving that you were right all along. My journey from dismissed employee to independent architect had taught me that true innovation comes not from chasing trends, but from understanding timeless principles and applying them to contemporary challenges.